Welcome to Shakespeare's history play, Henry V, a case study in leadership and motivation, which we're going to hear about today. And we are delighted to be here. We normally do this in 2 days. We call that our drive-by Shakespeare, and today we're calling this our fly-by Shakespeare, okay? So we're excited for this. This is a true story of a young king, 27 years old, who wanted to reclaim France. Now, in the 15th century, we called that invading France. He wanted to grow market share, expand the business. Once he got to France, though, he discovered this had to be more of a merger than an acquisition. He had to bring together diverse people, diverse languages, and train them to be part of one team and align them to his vision for these two countries that were just united. Sound familiar? Well, the answer is yes. And today we're going to tell you the relevance of Shakespeare's ancient wisdom to your everyday, workaday worlds in both your businesses and your life. But first, and I think I can see okay out here, I may go like this. I want to do a little baseline data here, and this will just be with raising your arm. How many of you studied Shakespeare in high school? Oh, good. And how many of you studied it in college? Also good. Now, how many of you use lessons and insights from Shakespeare in your everyday lives that you can apply to help you solve problems or live your lives? Okay, we have one down there. Now, I got to tell you, this is when I turn to Ken and say, Ken, it can only go up from here, right? It's a little bit like Buddy Green today when he said, everybody has such low expectations on the harmonica. And I was thinking, no, I think there's lower expectations either with Shakespeare. So happy to have you here, and thank you for coming back. And we're going to do that today. So very simply, why Shakespeare? 3 reasons. First of all, he had the greatest insights into human nature, into people. And Sam Rayburn, who was a Speaker of a House way back in the 50s and the 60s, said, if you can't size up somebody in 5 minutes, you don't belong in this profession of politics. And we would say that any leader has to be able to size up people in 5 minutes, and sometimes even less. Second reason why Shakespeare is he told the greatest stories. And we know that we learn best from stories, better than with do's and don'ts and PowerPoints. Third, and this one is a little harder one for you, he had the most beautiful language in the world. He was we think the world's greatest poet. Now, I know most of you, because of the hands that went up or didn't go up, probably struggled a little bit with the language, and that's normal. So our mission with Movers and Shakespeare's has been to take this acquired taste, break it into bite-sized pieces, and give it to you so you can digest his amazing wit and wisdom. And that's what we're going to do today. Now, why we started this was when Ken and I were first dating, and this was much longer than General Johnson's. This was like 47 years ago. So this was a long time. I discovered that Ken Adelman was one of those nerds in high school that loved Shakespeare, okay? And I didn't know that. And I always loved theater and acting and directing. So he said to me, well, I want to take you to your first Shakespeare play, full Shakespeare play at the Folger Theater here in Washington, D.C. I said yes, and I went. And I walked out and I said, Ken, I'm lucky if I understood 20% of what just happened. And so it was then that we started going to more plays, and we never read them. We always would either get the plot and get the characters, or would sometimes watch a movie back in the day, because Shakespeare never expected you to read the play. He wrote parts for people, and he handed out those parts, and he expected you to see it acted on a stage. And so in that process, we began seeing after 5 to 10 years that we were getting more leadership lessons out of Shakespeare than we were in our regular vocations in both public service and the private sector. So that was the way we did it. And I think there's also another reason, and it's the whole way that arts influence ideas. And I love that we have the voices of artists here today, with our wonderful piano player and harmonica. And we're now bringing you the art of the play and the art of literature to this. And Shakespeare had a great way of talking about art and its effect on life. He had a quote that said, well, this is paraphrasing a tiny bit, "The arts help you apprehend what cool reason cannot comprehend." In other words, we know something when we hear it, but what the arts do is underlines that so we feel it. And it takes the language that we hear in Shakespeare, which goes to our brain, but the stories we hear from Shakespeare go to our heart. And that's why we started Movers and Shakespeare's 1997, and we continued our other lives with it. And we've done hundreds of these seminars, usually not this many, so this is kind of fun today. Hundreds of these seminars over the years. So Ken's going to tell you the story today about one of the most famous battles in English history, the Battle of Agincourt. Then he's going to tell you the story of one of the most famous motivational speeches in history that also comes from this play. And then after that, in order to be true to the arts, we are going to have actors from 5 of the attendees here at the Imagine Solutions meeting. And they will be in costume, these wonderful capes and hats, and they are otherwise known as the voluntold actors, okay? And they will be up here, and all I can guarantee you is this afternoon at the very end of our short little session here, you will see Shakespeare done like you've never seen it done before. So I can guarantee that for you. So without any further ado, but with much ado, I'm going to turn it over to my husband and Vice President of Movers and Shakespeare's, Ken Adelman.
Thank you. I am Vice President of Movers and Shakespeare's because there are only 2 of us in the organization. Carol is President, and I'm used to this because when we were first married, Carol was in the Foreign Service, and she was stationed in Africa, and I was doing my dissertation. We went over to Zaire, and I think I was the first dependent husband in the Foreign Service. And the ambassador's wife didn't know what to do with me, so she invited me to the Bridge Club on Wednesday, the Flower Arranging Club on Thursday, and the Stitch and Chat Club on Friday. People have said over the years, wasn't it humiliating being a dependent husband? I said it was wonderful, to tell you the truth. It's been a career goal of mine ever since to return to being a dependent husband. But somehow, Carol wouldn't go along with that. It's wonderful to be here in Imagine Solutions. I loved when Randy told us you're going to have Understanding North Korea for your April 2nd meeting. I just 2 years ago, in my other capacity, I gave a speech in Tokyo on understanding North Korea, and the head of the Foreign Affairs agency in Japan came up after my speech and said, "Ambassador Adelman, for your remarks, you deserve much clap." I told him that's okay, and he says, no, you deserve much clap. And I tried to persuade him that I really didn't want much clap. But as Carol said, we're going to tell you in very flyby manner, Henry V. This is a true story. So even if you don't like Shakespeare, a lot of people like military history. This actually happened. The Battle of Agincourt was fought on October 25th, 1415. It was fought by the British in the middle of France in a little place called Agincourt. And the British were really outnumbered. They were outnumbered. The British at that time, Henry, who led his troops directly, had something like 6,000 troops. The French had 30,000 or maybe 60,000. The French had armor. Henry had none. The French had a cavalry. Henry had no horses. The French were well rested. Henry had marched his guys 17 miles a day through France, and the French were, being French, very well fed. And Henry's guys were eating nuts and berries. So it really looked like Henry and his troops were toast. Someone said French toast, but I wouldn't say that. But anyway, they were like toast. Henry knew that he had to do something very critical. He went around the night before the battle, on October 24th, 1415, and he listened to his troops in disguise. So this was the first example of walk-around management. And the next day, he gave the greatest motivational speech in history. Winston Churchill modeled his World War II speeches on the St. Crispin Day speech. It was used in boats going over to D-Day, St. Crispin Day speech, and it uses the term Crispin and Crispian because they were two brothers whose Saint's Day was that day, October 25th. And the brothers were shoemakers, so it showed that the little guy, the common guy, could become a saint. What we're going to do now is show you the St. Crispin Day speech, and then turn it over to you real quickly. Put your hand in the air. What elements did you see in this speech that makes for a great motivational speaker? Okay? And so, ladies and gentlemen, one of the great treats of Imagine Solution, the St. Crispin Day speech.
Of fighting men, they have full 70,000.
That's 5 to 1. Besides, they are all fresh.
Bring me
These are
just a glass of
fearful
water.
odds.
Just a little
Oh,
bit of
that we
water.
now had here. But 1/10,000 of those men in England that do no work today.
Ken.
What's he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor. God's will, I pray thee, wish not one man more. Brother, proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispians. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand at tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall see this day and live old age will yearly, on the vigil, feast his neighbors and say, tomorrow is St. Crispin's. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in their mouths as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers,
For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition.
And gentlemen in England, now abed, shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, whiles any speaks that thought with us upon St. Crispin's Day!
My sovereign lord, bestow yourself with speed. The French are bravely in their battle set, and will with all expedients march upon us.
All things are ready if our minds be so.
Perish the man whose mind is backward now.
Thou dost not wish more help from England, cuz?
God's will, my liege. Would you and I alone, without more help, could fight this royal battle?
You know your places! God be with you all!
Okay, is that all of you at your Monday morning board meetings, or prophet or not prophet? Is it? Go on. Okay, what we're going to do here is just yell out and we'll repeat anything you saw on that what was Henry doing here? What kind of techniques was he using? Or just yell out and raise your hand so I can see you, and then we'll repeat it and we'll go through a few of these. Yes, back there. Us against the world, absolutely. And it was a total optimism, too. You know, he never mentioned the battle. He never mentioned the French. It was just sort of, we are going to do this. And so go on this side, and Ken can see you there.
Yeah. A sense of immortality, a mission, really. And the key to great motivation is to tie one another, the group together. Remember that band of brothers, the unofficial motto of the Marine Corps. We band of brothers. Tie everybody together and then tie them to the overall mission. And Carol has a wonderful story about mission. And tell them that.
Yeah, in this time, there was a divine right of kings, right? So he had a direct line to God. And so we don't bring religion in the workforce that much today, but in Henry's time, he could. And there was always reminding people of this battle, that it didn't, even if you win, you're going to be back with me at the bar, rolling up your sleeves, showing your scars, if you remember that. If you don't, you'll be with God. And it's the importance of reminding people in whatever endeavor they're doing, whether it's for-profit or not-for-profit, what that higher purpose is. There's a wonderful story. Two people were cutting stones, and a man walked up to the first person and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm cutting stones." He walks up to the second person and says, "What are you doing?" And she says, "I'm part of a team, and we're building a cathedral." So you want to ask yourself, in all of your for-profit, non-profit board or practitioner roles, which answer would your employees be giving?
What else? Yeah, please. You're lucky to be there. He takes the disadvantage that they're outnumbered, they're outgunned, they're outhorsed, they're outarmored, they're out everything, and he says, we're the lucky ones. Everybody's going to be jealous of us. So he takes that liability and turns it into an asset. Why are they going to be jealous of us? Because we have this great mission, and we're going to be remembered for this mission. And every year on October 25th, there is a celebration of the Battle of Agincourt and the tremendous victory that they had. One of the great victories in history. If you read a book, there's a wonderful book that's called The Face of Battles by John Keegan. And it's about Normandy, it's about Waterloo. The first chapter is the Battle of Agincourt and about how Henry pulled off this amazing upset.
Okay, a hand right over there. Oh, you mean it's an honor to be there because it's a select few? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes, wonderful point. Remember when he says, his vice president there says, "Gee, I wish we had but 1/10,000th of all the men abed in England today, of all the guys sleeping, if we just had 1/10 of them." And what do you remember what Henry said to him?
Don't share the glory.
He said, "Don't wish one man more, otherwise you'll have to share the glory." I mean, what a line. what a line. So he turns that liability of too few men into an asset, which is a very powerful tool in business and one that you have to think about. So, good.
Okay, another point. What else do you have?
Gave him a choice.
Very
They
good.
Got the buy-in.
Yep.
And how did he gave him a choice? He said, look, if you don't want to stay at this battle, you can leave and we'll give you money. And what else were they going to give him? A passport. That's, to our knowledge, the first time the word passport came into being, or at least into common use. So it was that buy-in. And of course, the brotherhood, that we few, we happy few.
Okay, what else? Anything over here? Yeah, please. He was going to be there with them.
Yes.
Okay, he was in the front lines with his guys. The French king wasn't even in the back lines. He was back in Paris. So he was set a leadership by example. Good.
Okay, well, you guys are terrific. There's a few more
Wonderful.
points, but this is wonderful. And we're glad. We wanted to show you this speech because it's so special.
A few other points. He mentioned his top staff by name. He went around, and then at the end of the speech, he went back to the biggest doubter. And the guy said, God, we don't even know what's going to happen here. I wish we had, 1,000 more to help us. He goes back and he says to the main doubter, do you still want more men? And what does the doubter say? Do you remember? You and I alone could fight this royal battle, okay?
We kind of call that the high testosterone moment, before the battle.
He's really pumped up. So it's an amazing. The thing that Winston Churchill borrowed from this is that when Henry says, people are going to look back on this and cherish what we did, and there's going to be a feast and remember us. And Winston Churchill said in May of 1940 that when people look back in the 1,000 years of the British Empire, they're going to look back right now and say, this was our finest hour. So it's an amazing speech that Churchill used very well. Good.
Okay, I think it is time for our voluntold actors to ascend to the stage here, unless we have lost any of you. Good.
Okay.
Good, okay.
Let me just
and
tell...
in the meantime, Ken's going to talk to you about Shakespeare's language.
Yes. And our actors are going to come up and get robed. Let me just tell you that in the Globe Theater, during Shakespeare's day, there were two main ways of expressing your appreciation
just put it on over.
for the actors, okay?
There you go.
One was to pound their feet. Here you can pound your hands. Let's hear it. On the table. Louder. Good. Second, and more important, they would shout out and have their hands go twice with an Old English phrase that meant hooray, hooray, which was huzzah, huzzah. All right? Let's try that. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Huzzah, huzzah. I didn't see many hands going up, and when I don't see hands, that's not an official huzzah. Okay? So let's go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Huzzah, huzzah. Now, to tell you the truth, that's a nice but kind of mediocre huzzah. That's not, that's appropriate for a mediocre cast. Our cast today is not mediocre. They're not that good. No, they're superb, okay? For that superb cast, we need superb huzzah, huzzah. So let's hear it again. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Huzzah, huzzah. That should be your minimum acceptable huzzah. And let me just tell you that very often when we do movers and Shakespeares for such a distinguished group, at the end of our performance, we have a spontaneous standing ovation. It's not suggested at all, it's spontaneous. In part, it is because of the tremendous talent that you will see on this stage. And in part, it is even more overwhelming relief that you will feel not being on this stage. So you might be really motivated for a spontaneous standing ovation. So ladies and gentlemen, we have an amazing cast. that is going to be right here. We're going to give each one a Huzzah, okay? First of all, Kamala Patton, right here. She is superintendent of the Collier County Schools, all their schools. When she was in first grade, she was the star in a play called Little Witches. Let's greet Kamala. Huzzah, huzzah. Good. Secondly, we have Ronnie Antek. Ronnie is in charge of the volunteers of Imagine Solution. She was, when she was little, in The Wizard of Oz. I don't know what it is about you gals and witches, but she was the Wicked Witch of the West. Let's hear it. Huzzah, huzzah. Jim Fleck. Jim is amazing. He is the Companion Order of Canada. Now, I don't know what that means either, but to Jim, it's a very big deal. So for all of us, it's a very big deal as well. He was in a skit years ago, and he was given the Hamlet speech, suit the word to the action and the action to the words, and he practiced it, and he was all ready to roll. And then when the play started, the director just took his speech from him. So God knows how garbled Shakespeare was after that. That's Jim. Let's hear it. Huzzah, huzzah. Tom Everest is chairman of Imagine Solutions. He was in a Meta Terra musical years ago. He was in the choir singing. Everybody said, thank you very, very much, Tom. That's just wonderful of you. When they handed out the mics, Tom noticed that his mic was dead, all right? And no one said that was by chance, Tom. And let's hear it for Tom. Huzzah, huzzah. And John, you saw King John, you saw doing a wonderful job with the medical panel this morning. John LaPook, he is chief medical correspondent of CBS News. He was in a college singing group called the SOBs, all right? Perfect for your later career in correspondence, I'll tell you that.
Short, of course, for Society of Orpheus and Bacchus.
Okay, good.
Society of Orpheus and Bacchus. At least that's his story.
Okay, what we are going to do now is I'm going to tell you briefly about the words of Shakespeare, and then you're going to hear the words of Shakespeare from our amazing cast. In Shakespeare's time, somebody of his class, and he was lower middle class. His father was a tanner who made gloves and hats. Someone of his class would have a total vocabulary of 700 to 800 words. A graduate from Oxford or Cambridge at that time would have a total vocabulary of 2,000 to 3,000 words. John Milton, the greatest English poet one generation after Shakespeare, had a vocabulary, total vocabulary, John Milton, 7,400 words. William Shakespeare has a vocabulary of 22,000 words. It's just off the charts. And if you say to somebody, it's not just the number of words, it's the way he put the words together that forms the English we use today. If you say to someone, oh, you're just going on a wild goose chase, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you said to someone, it's a bewitching hour, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you go from Florida out west and say, westward ho, you are quoting Shakespeare. Ladies and gentlemen, here are just a few of the 100 phrases that we have picked up to show that as you go about your daily life, you are quoting Shakespeare. Hit it.
So if you cannot understand my argument and you declare it's all Greek to me, you are quoting Shakespeare.
If you claim to be more sinned against than sinning, you are quoting Shakespeare.
If you recall your salad days, you are quoting Shakespeare.
If you act more in sorrow than in anger, if your wish is father to a thought, if your lost property has vanished into thin air, you are quoting Shakespeare.
If you have ever refused to budge an inch or suffered from green-eyed jealousy, if you have played fast and loose, if you have been tongue-tied, a tower of strength, hoodwinked, or in a pickle.
If you've knitted your brow, made a virtue of necessity, insisted on fair play, slept not one wink, or laughed yourself into stitches,
If you have had short shrift, cold comfort, or too much of a good thing, if you have ever seen better days or lived in a fool's paradise, you, as luck would have it, are quoting Shakespeare.
If you clear out bag and baggage, if you think it is high time, and that is the long and short of it, if you believe the game is up and the truth will out, even if it involves your own flesh and blood, if you suspect foul play,
If you have your teeth set on edge at one fell swoop without rhyme or reason, then, to give the devil his due, if the truth were known, for surely you have a tongue in your head, you are quoting Shakespeare.
Okay, right out here.
Even if you bid me good riddance
Oh,
and send me
bye-bye.
packing.
Boo.
If
Bye-bye.
you wish I was dead as a door,
Yes,
now.
we do.
If you think I am an eyesore,
We do.
a laughingstock, the devil incarnate,
Yes.
a stony-hearted villain, bloody-minded, or a blinking idiot, then, by Jove, oh, all one to me.
You are quoting Shakespeare. Okay. All right, now we're going to bow.
Start quoting him now.
Standing ovation.
Shakespeare and the women you will wow. Just explain
good.
a few lines from Othello.
Okay.
I can take it
You'll
off.
think you're a hell of a fella. If you blonde, don't respond when you
You were great.
Thank you.
what Tony